Hello, and welcome to What a Nerd. I'm K-Huge, and today we're going to be taking a look at my top 10 shitty things in BioShock Infinite. Now, I've already made a video called Top 10 Awesome Things in BioShock Infinite, and that's because I love that game. It's one of my favorite games to come out recently, but as I was playing it, and I was like seeing all these things that I loved, I was at the same time seeing some things that, while they didn't ruin the game, they were shitty. So here's my list. If you don't like cynicism, then why not go look at my top 10 awesome things in BioShock Infinite. It's full of good feelings and happy times. Just keep in mind that there are going to be full spoilers for BioShock Infinite. It's been out for 5,000 light years, so you should have played it by now. Or pause this video and go play it. That being said, here it is, my top 10 shitty things in BioShock Infinite. The first few items on this list are less of shitty things and more like missed opportunities. Things that could have contributed to the success of BioShock Infinite, but didn't quite hit the mark. The first missed opportunity is random gear. Gear is a great addition to the game, don't get me wrong. If they had approached it slightly differently, it probably would have been included on my top 10 awesome things list. Irrational Games did a lot to encourage using different builds throughout BioShock Infinite. I talked about this in my other video. Hey, why not watch that one after this? Stuff like guns and vigor upgrades suggest a design revolving around the player's decision to invest in specific things, like stats in an RPG. Gear in this game functions as equipment that changes the way you play slightly. Burning Halo, for example, has a 70% chance to set an enemy on fire when using a melee attack. Yeah, they're just sitting there, but they're racists. So yeah, if gear is so rad, why is it on a list of shitty things? That's because gear in this game is random. With few exceptions, every time you open up a little gift box, you are randomly given one of the, expansions aside, 41 different pieces of gear. And you can't even get them all in a single playthrough. That means if you think it'd be fun to run a build that focuses on melee attacks, you're stuck hoping that you get the gear that complements such a playstyle. Look at something like Dark Souls. Like, yeah, okay, that game has random drops too. I just want a Baldur's Side sword, is that so much to ask? But a ton of the equipment is in predetermined locations, and even the randomized loot will drop consistently from the same enemies. There are different genres of game, sure, but since BioShock Infinite seems to want to encourage the player to plan out how they play, wouldn't it make more sense to give them a more consistent method of obtaining specific equipment, like in most RPGs? It could be that BioShock Infinite's designers wanted to force the player to adapt throughout the game. Like, the player may start out with one sort of build based on gear found early on, but be forced to alter it based on gear gained later in the game. It's an interesting design choice for sure, but it feels out of place in this game, especially considering the fact that all other upgrades are chosen. A game that does random gear really well, and a game that I adore, by the way, is Binding of Isaac Rebirth. The difference there is that the entire game is designed around random upgrades, and if you get a crappy build in that game, it doesn't really matter. It's super short and encourages the player to play through countless times. BioShock Infinite, on the other hand, is so long and takes a while to even get into the meat of the combat. And the rest of the game isn't designed around random gear, making it a more or less inconsequential addition to the game. And that was disappointing. And that's why it's number 10 on my list. Okay, moving on. Tears are one of the coolest ideas in BioShock Infinite, and are utilized both in the gameplay and the story. Basically, tears are portals into parallel universes or different times, which sounds cool, right? Wrong. Turns out they're just another poorly executed good idea, both in the gameplay and the story. Gameplay-wise, the tear mechanic is used to bring different things into the battlefield. For instance, you might spawn a Tesla tower to do damage to nearby enemies, or you might spawn health packs to recover your life when getting low. The problem here is that there's no real restriction to what you bring through tears. Yeah, okay, you can only have one tear active at a time, but that barely matters. If you want a shotgun, spawn it. Did you change your mind? That's okay, you can also go and spawn this Tesla tower. or this RPG, or hey, let's get some health, spawn something else, and come back and get more health. The gameplay would barely change if all of these things were active at once. It seems like it'd be way more interesting of a mechanic if there was some sort of drawback. Like maybe you're limited to a certain number of tears per area. Elizabeth is the one who opens the tears, so you could give some explanation like she gets tired after a certain number of tears being open. Who cares? It doesn't really matter, just make it more interesting of a game mechanic. I was excited to see what tears would offer, and really they're just a different way to incorporate things you can interact with. It's barely different to bring these objects into the world through tears than it would be if they were already there to begin with. Story-based tears are similarly disappointing. Every now and then, Elizabeth will look into a tear into another universe which has more promising circumstances, and then transport herself and Booker through the tear. For example, Elizabeth and Booker find the confiscated equipment that Chen Lin, the gunsmith, needs, but have no way of transporting it back to him.
Well, we sure as hell aren't gonna be able to carry all this back to the shop. God, we didn't think this all the way through.
Yeah, and neither did the writers. So they step into a universe in which the equipment, they presume, is back with Chen Lin. It's a cool concept, but I feel like it sort of gets glazed over. Sure, there's a decent payoff towards the end of the game when things start to get a little crazy, but other than that, tears are not as interesting as they could be. Like, cool, we stepped into a universe where the equipment is back, so why did we waste time getting to the confiscated equipment in the first place? And while I thought differences in other universes were still interesting, they weren't as drastic as I would have liked. I mentioned thinking it was cool that Booker was a working class hero in one universe in my other video, and how I liked the tonal shift from one universe into the other. And yeah, it was interesting, but it wasn't that interesting. I feel like the story writers could have gotten really weird with it. As a result, these story-based tears never quite accomplished what I wanted them to. The best thing I can say about the final fight in BioShock Infinite is that it's mechanically and thematically a much more interesting final boss than, spoilers, Fontaine in BioShock 1. That fight was jarring and weird and completely unlike the rest of the game. What I liked about the final fight in BioShock Infinite is that you were still using the environment to fight enemies you had learned how to defeat over the course of the game. At the very least, it was a proper test of the skills you had developed so far, and you were still ending a conflict alluded to at the start of the game. Despite the improvements over the first game's final fight though, it still fell flat for me. The lead up to the final fight on the airship was awesome, and I just wish it built up to something more worthwhile. Instead, we have a glorified escort mission / tower defense sort of fight, which is more frustrating than fun or satisfying. The rest of BioShock Infinite is built around your own survival and your own health bar. I don't know why the developers thought adding an additional health bar to worry about for one fight would be a good format for the final boss. It isn't that hard, it just isn't fun. And I don't like it. So we're starting to tread into straight up shitty thing territory. We're almost there, don't worry. Now, Songbird is another one of those things that I was hyped for, and I'm pretty positive everyone else was just as hyped. They showed him off in a bunch of previews for the game, and we were all thinking, holy shit, that's the new Big Daddy. And it literally is the Big Daddy of this particular universe, as we find out by the end of the game. And all throughout BioShock Infinite, Songbird almost gets you, but it's always cinematic, you never actually get to fight him. And I was okay with that. It was an interesting plot device, the fact that there was always this huge terrifying thing keeping up with you the entire time. Big Daddy fights were always an ordeal in the original BioShock game, but I was okay that for most of this game I wasn't fighting Songbird. But he was always in the back of my mind. I looked forward to the day I could defeat him, and then I could tell I was getting towards the end of the game, and still I wasn't fighting Songbird, and then, wait, what? Songbird's on my side now? What the hell? Oh, okay, cool, great. Songbird drowns, fantastic. It makes everything that happens with Songbird over the course of the game so inconsequential and uncompelling to me. They intentionally build it up as this big scary thing, but then there's no payoff. Pretty shitty if you ask me.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, this game sucks! One major theme in BioShock Infinite involves subverting the Disney princess trope, or at least that's how I interpreted it. I talked about this in my Top 10 Awesome Things video, But Columbia is built like Disneyland, complete with differently themed areas broken up by bright, shiny signs. Elizabeth is literally locked away in a tower, presumably to further mirror this Disney aesthetic. She turns out to be by far the most powerful and destructive character in the game. So even though you're her Prince Charming, and, well, her father, coming to her rescue, by the end, this is supposedly undermined by her sheer power. Now yeah, that's all fine and great, and I'm absolutely all for powerful female characters and subverting sexist tropes. However, BioShock Infinite doesn't actually succeed in doing this. Elizabeth's power is initially locked away by a man. She is then rescued from a tower by a man. Yes, I already talked about how this supposedly gets subverted, but let me finish. Elizabeth continues to rely on Booker throughout the game. She can't pull levers, she can't lift sliding doors, she can't really do anything on her own. She isn't given any sort of agency in this game either. As the player, you command Elizabeth to unlock things and open tears, and she happily obeys. Eventually, Elizabeth is unintentionally abandoned by Booker, and as a result, she is yet again captured. This time, one version of Elizabeth is even brainwashed by Comstock to do his evil bidding. The other version must yet again be rescued by Booker. Even once Elizabeth's full power is unlocked, this is a direct result of Booker's heroism. Hell, by the end of the game, we learn that Elizabeth's power is not even a result of her own competence, but rather the result of the conflict between Booker and Comstock. I find this incredibly frustrating, especially due to the missed potential. The idea of subverting such a pervasive trope is awesome, and the video game world could use more strong female characters. But I mean, Elizabeth can't even pull a lever? A lever? Come on. The execution here was disappointing to say the least, and I wish this had been implemented more effectively. Lockpicks in BioShock Infinite are used to unlock secrets. Sometimes this is gear, other times it's infusions, which are used to upgrade health, shields, and salts, and sometimes it's just money. That sounds nice, secrets are great, and I typically love that kind of thing. The problem is the way lockpicks inhibit you from actually uncovering these secrets. Sometimes, doors or safes or things are hidden and out of the way. You have to explore the environment to find them. Instead of being rewarded for exploring, now you're faced with something else you have to get past. Other times, these locked things will be in plain view. This is perhaps just as bad because it's quote-unquote a secret, except you don't get the satisfaction of actually discovering it. I imagine this is a more interesting system on something like 1999 mode, in which I'm guessing you are hard-pressed for lockpicks at all times and have to know ahead of time which locks have the best payout. The problem on other modes and first playthroughs is that you either don't have enough lockpicks or you have a surplus of them. So that means you either have to progress through the level until you have enough lockpicks and then backtrack to something you've already found, or in the case of a surplus, these restrictions are functionally meaningless. It just seems like an unnecessary way to pad out the game. If you're going to give the player an obvious infusion, just give them that infusion. Why make them go find lockpicks, especially when you tend to have more than enough by the end of the game? A lot of these locked sections don't even contain a great enough reward for the cost, which just feels like an additional slap in the face. So I know BioShock 2 isn't canon, it's like fan fiction, but one thing I really like in that game is the hacking system. You still need ammo, but that's pretty easy to come by in that game. And hacking something is quick and fun and done on the go. Definitely a step up from the tedious hacking in the first game, and a more interesting system than the lockpick system in BioShock Infinite. So the story in BioShock Infinite is leading up to something. The action is rising, the tension is building. You're coming after Comstock and you're gonna smash his dumb face into a goddamn fountain.
Nothing is finished! You lock her up for her whole life!
You're on your way to his house, gonna kill him where he sleeps. And then, right when you're ready to enter Comstock's domain, you're forced into this tedious side story about Lady Comstock, effectively undoing all dramatic tension that has been built up at this point. What's worse is that this side story involves a good deal of backtracking. There's a split path on the way to Comstock's house, and you have to go through both in order to complete this part of the game. The thing is, you're already incentivized to explore both sections because you want to scrounge for hidden goodies. If you're like me, you'll have fully explored both paths before actually being forced to. Then you get the Lady Comstock quest and you have to do it again. You have to hunt down 3 tears before being able to fight her and gain access to Comstock House. Sure, her story is important and to some extent interesting, but this was such a lame way to integrate it into the larger narrative. It feels like something that probably could have been cut out of the final version of the game, or at least done differently. For instance, with less backtracking, i.e. no backtracking, and done at a different point of the game. It just felt like it threw off the main story's momentum, similar to how the Little Sister escort mission threw off the momentum in the first game.
Nothing is finished! Nothing is... nothing...
Number 3 on my list is sort of a generic name for the last 2 specific shitty things on this list. Backtracking. I thought the lockpick system and Lady Comstock storyline were both particularly bad offenders deserving their own spot on the list, but backtracking is a common problem throughout the game. The levels in the first BioShock game were more open in their design, making level exploration and some degree of backtracking actually compelling. Enemies would respawn too, so there was actual conflict when going back to a previously explored area. In BioShock Infinite, however, when you go back to a previous area, it feels like a ghost town unless backtracking is built into the story. It just feels like padding. This game is far more linear than BioShock 1, so why kill momentum by forcing the player to go backwards? It's often to go back for optional secrets, but most players are probably going to do this at some point. And sometimes you're forced to go to an area and backtrack for story reasons. The game though, like I mentioned, is linear, much more so than the original. It would benefit from constant forward motion since that's generally how the game is designed anyways. Look at this part after riding the elevator in Finkton proper. The initial elevator ride is incredibly long, and I had to ride it again because I needed to go back for something. And since I was pressing buttons out of boredom on the ride down, I accidentally pressed the button, forcing me to wait again while I went back up. And then I had to ride it yet another time to go back down and get what I actually wanted. It's weird that the game encourages backtracking when it has bottlenecks like this elevator ride to simultaneously discourage it. Plus, the game has several points of no return. In BioShock 1, you could go back to any previous level for something you missed. In this one though, you were sometimes required to backtrack for something. For example, if you don't have enough lockpicks. But due to these points of no return, you can lock yourself from being able to go back. Or if you are still able to go back, you can't just warp there, you have to run all the way to where you need to go. Backtracking is not fun, it's filler, and it goes against some of the fundamental design choices of the game. And it seems like it could have been easily avoided. This is one of the things I've alluded to throughout both this video and my top 10 awesome things video. Coming in at number 2 is the fact that nothing in this game makes any fucking sense, at least the first time through. The way the narrative in BioShock Infinite is conveyed is absolutely atrocious. Again, I'd like to remind you at this point, overall I love this game, which is a testament to how great each individual component of the game is. Unfortunately, the narrative as a whole is needlessly confusing and will leave you asking new questions every 5 seconds. You know when you're watching a TV show with your mom and something happens and then she asks, "What just happened?" and you say, "They literally just explained it, pay attention." Well, with BioShock Infinite, you're your mom and Irrational Games is you, except they're telling you to go fuck yourself constantly. It's an imperfect analogy. And then by the end of the game, even when the plot comes together and you think you understand everything, you don't. It's still fucking cryptic. It's still fucking ambiguous as all hell. You'll need to play multiple times and research the BioShock wiki to finally piece it together. And even then there will be at least something you're unsure of. This is a narrative style that seems to be getting pretty popular recently, especially among the indie scene or art scene of gaming. A game like Transistor has the same problem. It's ambiguous and confusing, and by the end of it, you still don't really know what's going on. And I don't mean games should spoon-feed their stories or whatever. Like, it doesn't all need to be explicitly stated or clear the first time around. But I should have some clue as to what the fuck is going on. A good example of a game with an effective, ambiguous narrative is Dark Souls. The difference with games like BioShock Infinite and Transistor is that they are heavily story-driven games. I was confused for most of the game as to what Booker is even aware of. He seems as confused as the player is, but we don't know why. He seems to be connected to everything somehow, but both he and the player don't know how exactly. And we don't know why he doesn't know. And from there it just gets worse. Think back to the first BioShock game. You started the game unsure of everything and unsure of what this crazy world is. sort of similar to BioShock Infinite, and there was still this unraveling of the mystery of rapture as the game proceeded, but it wasn't confusing in the same way BioShock Infinite is. You basically knew everything you needed to know to make some sense of the immediate situation you were faced with, and more was revealed as time went on. It also still had depth enough to reveal more after multiple playthroughs. Maybe the writers for BioShock Infinite just bit off more than they could chew or something, but the larger narrative needed to be conveyed more effectively.
Why are we back here?
This isn't the same place, Booker.
Of course it is. I remember.
Are you ready to leave behind all
You're
that
not-
has gone before? Wipe the slate clean.
Who are you?
As it turns out, the shittiest thing about BioShock Infinite is initially what I loved most about it. It explores all these cool metaphysical concepts, most notably the existence of infinite possible real universes. The story builds to what is, on the surface, a mind-blowing ending. You, the protagonist, are also the primary villain. That's awesome. And your companion throughout the entire game, your daughter that you didn't know you had, kills you so as to end the possible universes in which you become a villain. Whoa, that's so philosophically deep and interesting. Nope, it's not. I thought about the ending to this game a lot, and about all the implied metaphysical theories that the game endorses. I just graduated with a degree in philosophy, so I was studying a lot of these sorts of theories while playing through the game. So yeah, I thought a lot about it, to the point of writing a 4,000 word essay on it. And guess what? This game is metaphysical bullshit. One of the primary theories the game seems to endorse is modal realism, in which all possible universes are real universes. Okay, fine. Everything in the game seems to reinforce this endorsement. Now there are other problems, but the biggest one is this. If all possible universes are real universes, then how could that ending have changed anything? How can Comstock actually be stopped when Elizabeth kills Booker? What about all those possible universes in which Elizabeth has a change of heart and doesn't kill Booker? What if there's just one possible universe in which Booker sees it coming and runs away? There are other metaphysical inconsistencies and problems, but this is the biggest one. And no, don't tell me to ignore it, that it's just a game and that I should just have fun. No, this game gets off on being all mind-blowing and metaphysically interesting. And they're not just minor inconsistencies. I love pretty much anything with time travel, and 99% of things with time travel have at least some problems. No, the thing that's so frustrating is that this inconsistency is utterly story-breaking. It sells you on an established set of metaphysical rules and outright breaks them. And it's not just a background plot point, it is the primary plot point which drives the entire narrative. It's the reason these multiple BioShock universes exist. This is all I'll rant about it here, but because this is such an offensive, shitty thing to me, I have to make another BioShock Infinite video based on my 4,000 word essay, which includes an objective timeline of events which take place in the game. I also sent it to Ken Levine on Twitter as per his request. Hopefully it doesn't make him too upset if he actually reads the damn thing. So leave me comments below that you think would contribute to the video. There might be something I missed, who knows, but I don't think there is. And if I didn't miss anything, this is easily the shittiest thing about BioShock Infinite.
Nothing is finished!
Booker!
You lock her up for her whole life!
Hey guys, thanks for watching my video. This one took a really long time to get done. I just had a hard time getting the scripts figured out and everything all together, so thanks for watching. If you liked it, be sure to give it a like, and be sure to subscribe for more content. Below, you can click my top 10 awesome things in BioShock video, which is kind of the counterpart to this one. Or you can click my most recent video, which is a Bloodborne tips and tricks video. Be sure to follow me on Twitter to keep up with my social antics, and also be sure to like the What a Nerd Facebook page, which will keep you updated about what the channel's doing and what I'm up to. So yeah, thanks. Thank you.